Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. With the Stanley Cup Finals just around the corner, I was just thinking, who is gonna win the Stanley Cup? Two good teams in the finals. You got the St. Louis Blues, that no one's seen this coming, and the Boston Bruins. If they would have taken a poll from when the Stanley Cup started, I don't think none of these teams would have got picked. I think the odds on favor this year was the Tampa Bay Lightnings, who got swept by Columbus. No one's seen this coming. Nobody. Nobody's seen I think this year was the most. I'm pretty sure a lot of people got their predictions so wrong that I believe NHL.com had to do the fantasy pick for the Stanley Cup playoff prediction, right? I'm pretty sure, because everybody got everything wrong. So nobody picked St. Louis or Boston to go to the final. What I predicted from the east side is either Boston or Toronto would take, one of them is going to go through, but then they'll lose to Tampa Bay. That's what my prediction was. Now, of course, I'm a Leaf fan, but in reality, Boston is the team that gives us a hard time. We can't beat the Boston Bruins. We had a good chance this year, and we blew it. You're up 3-2 series, we're going home, and you choked the last two games. So, that was our fault. Nobody predicted St. Louis on the west side to come out of that side. I took Winnipeg Jets to beat the St. Louis Blues. Well, was I wrong? The Dallas Stars series, that was a coin toss. I didn't see Dallas taking them to 7, but I mean, out of the two teams that they faced, between the Winnipeg Jets and San Jose Sharks, Dallas gave St. Louis the hardest time to get through. Game 7 in double overtime. They beat Winnipeg in 6 games, and they beat San Jose in 6 games. Nobody's seen that coming. Nobody. So, the last two teams, of course, is the Boston Bruins and St. Louis Blues. Now, I was reading that the average, actually, sorry, the ratings, the playoff ratings for the NHLs are down. And I think they said, if I read it correctly, they said that it's the lowest that they've been, I believe, in over 30 years. They were saying on NHL.com. That's what the report says. But we have a Stanley Cup final, and it's going to be Boston Bruins and St. Louis Blues. Now, this has a good storyline. The last time that these two met was 50 years ago. The famous Bobby Orr scoring while getting tripped, and he's flying in midair. And 50 years later, the St. Louis Blues have a chance to avenge the loss from 50 years ago. Now, both teams are good. Defensive wise, I think I would give St. Louis the edge on defense. Forward wise, I would give Boston the edge on forward. Goalie wise is where it's tricky in the series. Now, Tuukka Rask has been playing out of his mind. And Binnington, what else can I say about Binnington? I surprised a lot of us. I didn't see this coming. So let's just look right now at Boston Bruins. Of course, that forward line, the Bergeron, Pasternak, and Marchand, is deadly. They struggled in the Columbus series, but the final two games they picked it up and they put away Columbus pretty easily. The second line is Krejci, Johansson, and the Brusque. I don't know if they're going with that one, but if you're looking at just the forwards alone, I do say that the Boston Bruins have the edge on the St. Louis Blues forwards. When it comes to their defense, like I said, no, Boston Bruins defensemen, they're pretty good, but the only factor I see is Mr. Chara. He's not the Chara of 2010 when they won the Stanley Cup. He's much older, much slower, and that's going to be the factor I find that St. Louis will beat the Boston Bruins. Now, I think the only way that can save Boston would be Tuukka Rask. He is playing phenomenal. I think this is the best I've seen him play in the playoffs. The last time they won the Stanley Cup, it was Tim Thomas in net, and Tuukka Rask was the backup. So he has a chance to make a name for himself and see if he can finally get the Stanley Cup. But to do that, they have to get through the St. Louis Blues. If you look at the St. Louis Blues, like I said, their forwards, I think Boston, when it comes to forward lines, they have the edge on forwards. Boston has the edge on forwards on St. Louis. Now, I'm not knocking down St. Louis players, but I mean, the only elite that I see that they have in the forwards is Tarasenko. The rest are superstars, so I wouldn't call them, you know, when you have one elite forwards. But what saves St. Louis are the defense, and if you look at their defensemen, they're obviously led by Pietrangelo, their captain, and in my opinion, I think St. Louis as defensemen are better than the Boston Bruins defensemen, and that's where the edge comes. Defense wins championship. That's my motto. When it comes to goaltending, I think Tuukka Rask, because of the experience in the playoffs, will come in as a factor, but I honestly think Jordan Binnington would come out on top of this series. I am taking the St. Louis Blues to win the Stanley Cup in 6 games. My prediction. That's what I'm taking. I'm putting it on the line that St. Louis will beat Boston Bruins. I think St. Louis is on a tear. So the St. Louis Blues remind me of the Los Angeles Kings of 2012. they came out of nowhere. They were the 8th place team to win the Stanley Cup. I'm pretty sure that by the first week of January, St. Louis Blues were in last place in the NHL. Last place. No one's seen this coming. So I'm going to say St. Louis will finally avenge the past, and they will beat Boston Bruins in 6 games. It's going to be a great series. It has a storyline, and storylines make for good hockey. So any sports that has a storyline is amazing behind it. So who would have thought that 50 years later, it took 50 years for these two teams to meet up again. That's unbelievable. They beat San Jose. Now I'm pretty sure the reporters are saying that San Jose was banged up. I get it, but who isn't banged up at this time? I'm disappointed in San Jose that this was their chance, and they blew it again. So, I mean, how many chances do you get? Disappointed in San Jose. I honestly thought this was their year. I picked them to win the Stanley Cup this year, which I never do. I never pick San Jose because they're known to choke. But I honestly thought this year was their year. So, but of course they didn't do that, and the rest was history. And St. Louis are in the Stanley Cup Finals against the Boston Bruins. And yes, I am picking the St. Louis Blues to win their first franchise Stanley Cup. This will be their first ever in franchise history, and I would like to see the St. Louis Blues win the cup. It's nice for a new city to win. You don't want. I was not a fan of Pittsburgh when they won back-to-back. I don't like back-to-backs, just like I am not cheering for Golden State. Now, obviously, I cheer for the Toronto Raptors, but if Milwaukee does end up beating us, I'm rooting for Milwaukee to beat Golden State. It's so boring when it's repetitive champions. It's just boring. And we've seen Boston win the Stanley Cup in 2010, which was 9 years ago. St. Louis has never won a Stanley Cup in the history of their franchise. So it'd be nice to see St. Louis finally raise the Stanley Cups. I mean, I remember watching in the late 80s St. Louis Blues with Al McInnes and Brett Hall. And they had really good teams when Pronger was there. I believe in the 90s. Was it early 2000? I think it was 2000, 99 or 2000, where they were the favorites of winning the Stanley Cups against Colorado. And Colorado came in and smacked them in 6 games and took them right out. All the reporters and everybody was saying that St. Louis is going to win the cup and they're the favorite. And they end up they went on to win the Stanley Cup, and I think this was it's the time they beat, was it New Jersey? I think it was New Jersey. Yeah, it was New Jersey. They beat New Jersey. New Jersey won the cup, and then the year after it was Colorado, New Jersey, and New Jersey got dethroned by Colorado. That was the same year St. Louis was supposed to win that cup that year, but of course, Colorado took them out in 6 games. I believe it was 6 games that they took them out. They took out St. Louis, Colorado, and but St. Louis always had a good team, always. It just always end up. I mean, they would come close, but they never made the Stanley Cup final. They would go to the Western Conference Finals, and then they bow out of that. And that's when they lose. But they always had a good team. But finally, they have their chance to finally get it. And I believe that this year they will finally stamp the Stanley Cup. The St. Louis Blues are my prediction to win the Stanley Cups in 6 games. They will take the cup finally. So it will be good for the St. Louis Blues and the city of St. Louis. So that's my prediction. The forwards, I give the edge to Boston. The defense, I give the edge to St. Louis. And when it comes to goaltending, yes, Tuukka Rask has the experience playoff experience. Yes, Binnington is the rookie in this, but if we go a few years back, it was Murray who brought the Stanley Cup to Pittsburgh in his first year in the NHL, and the rookie goalie gave Pittsburgh back-to-back Stanley Cups. So that's where I find the edge of St. Louis when it comes to, and I mean you can say all you want, but Binnington is just playing out of his brains. I mean, look at the last two games against San Jose. They only managed to score one goal. One goal. He shut him out in San Jose in Game 5, and in Game 6 he beat them 5-1. So the last two games Binnington has given up just one goal, and that's against a powerhouse like San Jose, which are very similar to the Boston Bruins. I can see, like, very similar to Boston. The play style of the San Jose Sharks are very similar to the Boston Bruins. Again, so I am picking St. Louis to finally get their Stanley Cup, their first one for the franchise. And that is it. So let me know if you agree or not agree in the comments below. I will be looking at the comments, see if you agree with me, or what your prediction and what you base your prediction on. That would be great. And don't forget to subscribe. I will have, these are just, I'm just pilot testing right now my channel. Like I said, I am gonna start my channel regularly in September of this year, when the new NHL game, NHL 20, comes out. So I'm just test piloting this, how it goes. But I will have a lot of contests out there. I will be giving away a lot of prizes, and hopefully, you know, I can build this channel for everyone to enjoy, and that's it, guys. So yeah, I will be looking at the comments, and again, don't forget to subscribe, and I will read the comments, and I want to see if you guys agree with me when it comes to the Stanley Cup final. Two teams that no one picked, St. Louis and Boston, and you know, all the big dog, they all got taken out, mostly in the first round. It started with the shocking of Tampa Bay. They got swept by Columbus, and no one seen that coming, and then it just went hurtling. So, but do let me know what you guys think and who you guys are predicting to win, and I will read the comments, and we'll take it from there. So I'm hoping to have another video going on tomorrow, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.